The Monday morning rush at Skyline Cafe was the kind of chaos that made people forget their humanity. Rain hammered the windows of downtown Seattle, sending customers inside with irritation written across their faces and water dripping from $1,000 coats. The espresso machine screamed. Phones buzzed with urgent emails. Everyone moved like they were running out of time. Alexandra Sterling stood at the counter, an island of composure in a sea of impatience. She wore a crimson Burberry coat that cost more than most people earned in a month. Her blonde hair was pulled into an immaculate twist. Behind her left ear sat a hearing aid worth $8,000, designed to be nearly invisible, to help her blend into a world that had no patience for difference. Her hands moved with practiced grace, forming shapes in American Sign Language. The gestures were fluid and precise, asking for something remarkably simple. An oat milk latte, no sugar, please. Tyler, the barista with a carefully groomed beard and an art degree gathering dust, stared at her blankly. Then he laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound that cut through the morning noise. Lady, this isn't charades. If you can't talk, maybe you should stick to the mobile app. A businessman in Brooks Brothers didn't even glance up from his phone. Starbucks has that feature. Might be easier for someone like you. Someone like you. The words landed like stones. Alexandra's expression remained neutral, the carefully constructed mask of someone who'd learned that showing pain only invited more. But her eyes told a different story. In them flickered something ancient and familiar, the loneliness of being invisible in plain sight. She commanded boardrooms. She closed deals worth hundreds of millions. From her office 40 floors above this street, she ran a technology empire that shaped the future. But here, ordering a $4 coffee, she didn't exist. In the corner of the cafe, a man wiping down tables looked up. Ethan Cross was 36 years old. His face had once been quick to smile, but now it carried losses that couldn't be measured in time alone. His barista apron was faded from too many washes. Around his eyes lived a weariness that no amount of sleep could touch. Beside him sat a 7-year-old girl with a ponytail and a frozen backpack. She was profoundly deaf, and she watched the world with the intense focus of someone who understood that communication required more than ears. Her small hands colored a Disney princess with fierce concentration until she noticed the woman at the counter. She tugged her father's sleeve, signing rapidly. Daddy, she's like me. She signs. Ethan's head snapped up. He saw the hearing aid, saw Alexandra's hands forming words no one would hear, saw the familiar shame of being dismissed for something beyond your control. Something inside him cracked open. He crossed the cafe in long strides, his hands already moving before he reached the counter. When he spoke, he did so in 2 languages simultaneously, voice and sign working together like they'd always belonged that way. I'm so sorry for the rudeness, his hands said while his voice added warmth his gestures couldn't carry. What would you like? Alexandra turned so quickly she nearly stumbled. For 3 heartbeats, she simply stared at this man in a stained apron who had just done something extraordinary. He had seen her as human. Her hands trembled slightly as she signed back. Oat milk latte, no sugar, thank you. The last 2 words were signed with an emphasis that spoke of genuine gratitude. Ethan turned to Tyler, and his voice carried an edge the younger man had never heard. Oat milk latte, no sugar. Tyler, take 15. I've got the counter. While the espresso machine hissed and steam rose like prayers, the little girl approached Alexandra with the fearless honesty only children possess. Her hands moved with careful deliberation. You're pretty. What's your job? Alexandra knelt to meet the child at eye level, and for the first time that morning, perhaps for the first time in months, she smiled genuinely. I work with computers, she signed simply. The girl's face brightened. My daddy used to work with computers too, but now he makes coffee because... Her small hands faltered. Because my mommy died. The words hung in the air like shattered glass. Alexandra's breath caught in her throat. She looked up at Ethan, who had gone very still. In his eyes lived a grief she recognized, the kind that came from loving someone completely and losing them too soon. When he brought her latte, Alexandra reached into her coat. She placed a business card in a thick envelope on the counter, signed a quick thank you, and walked toward the door. Ethan picked up the card. Everything stopped. Alexandra Sterling, Chief Executive Officer, Nexus Technologies. The floor tilted beneath his feet. The edges of his vision went dark. Because he knew that name. He knew that company. He knew the autonomous vehicle that had killed his wife 3 years ago, while executives buried evidence and lawyers made truth disappear like smoke. His daughter was tugging his sleeve, asking what was wrong, but Ethan couldn't move. He stood frozen, holding the business card of the woman who ran the company that had destroyed his life, watching her red coat disappear into the rain. Inside the envelope, a check for $500 and a handwritten note on cream-colored stationery. Mr. Cross, thank you for your kindness in a world that offers very little. I would like to offer you a consulting position on our AI sign language translation project. Flexible hours, $115,000 annual salary, full health benefits including coverage for your daughter's education and medical needs. Please consider AS $500, 2 weeks of his cafe salary, $115,000 a year. More than he'd earned in the past 3 years combined. Full health benefits. His daughter's specialized school cost $1,800 monthly. Her potential cochlear implant surgery, $78,000 he would never, ever have. Ethan stared at the check, looked at his daughter signing questions he couldn't process, looked at the eviction warning in his wallet giving him 15 days to pay 3 months back rent. Then he tore the check in half. That night, Ethan lay awake in his studio apartment, listening to his daughter cough in her sleep. The heating barely worked. Through paper-thin walls came the sounds of neighbors arguing about money, about all the ways the world ground people down until nothing remained but survival. He sat up and opened his laptop, torturing himself with searches for things forever out of reach. Cochlear implant procedures. Specialized education programs. The kind of future his daughter deserved, but he couldn't provide. Then, because he couldn't stop himself, he searched for his wife's death. Maya Cross, 34, software safety engineer, killed in autonomous vehicle malfunction. Nexus Technologies reaches settlement with family. Settlement. $25,000, barely enough to bury her. On his desk sat their wedding photo. Maya laughing, one hand resting on her stomach where a 13-week pregnancy grew in secret, neither of them knowing she had 6 days left to live. Ethan wore a silver bracelet on his wrist, engraved with 5 words. Listen with your heart. Maya had given it to him for his 33rd birthday, 72 hours before the accident that made him a widower and single father in the same terrible moment. At 2 in the morning, Ethan picked up his phone and dialed the number on Alexandra Sterling's business card. She answered on the second ring, her voice thick with sleep. Mr. Cross, I didn't expect... I'll take the job. His voice sounded hollow even to himself. But I have one condition. A pause. Name it. I want access to all autonomous vehicle safety records from 2019 to 2022. The silence stretched so long he thought she'd hung up. When Alexandra finally spoke, her voice had changed completely. Why? Because your company killed my wife. And I'm going to prove it. He hung up before she could respond. In her penthouse, 40 floors above the sleeping city, Alexandra Sterling sat in darkness, staring at her phone. She removed her hearing aids and let silence wrap around her like a familiar ghost. She knew the name Maya Cross. She'd known it for 3 years, and she'd done nothing. Nexus Technologies Tower rose from downtown Seattle like a glass monument to ambition. In the marble lobby, LED screens displayed stock prices and company achievements, while executives moved with the confidence of people who never questioned whether they deserved their power. Ethan felt out of place the moment he walked through the revolving doors. His jeans were worn. His jacket had a frayed cuff. His daughter clutched his hand tightly, her eyes wide as she absorbed the soaring ceilings and echoing footsteps of wealth. Alexandra met them at the elevator, transformed back into CEO mode. Tailored blazer, sharp heels, hair pulled into that flawless twist. But when she saw Lily, something in her carefully controlled expression softened. She knelt to the girl's level and signed. I'm glad you came. Lily signed back with childhood bluntness. Do you own this whole building? Alexandra's smile carried sadness. I'm in charge of it. That's different. The elevator climbed to the 25th floor in silence. Alexandra had prepared a private lab, state-of-the-art computers, digital whiteboards, and a corner transformed into a child's paradise of books and art supplies. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, Seattle stretched out like a promise written in steel and rain. The project is straightforward, Onima, Alexandra said, her hands supplementing her words. We're developing AI that translates American Sign Language into voice in real time. The goal is giving deaf and hard-of-hearing individuals instant communication in a hearing world. Ethan studied the code on the screens. Despite everything, despite his anger and grief, and the certainty that working here betrayed Maya's memory, professional interest flickered to life. The architecture was brilliant. Neural networks years ahead of industry standards. Gesture recognition algorithms that bordered on prescient. Who designed the core structure? He asked quietly. Alexandra's hands moved almost shyly. I did, 7 years ago, when I was a junior engineer and people still treated me like I might contribute something valuable. Ethan looked at her with new understanding. Not the CEO, not the face of the company that had destroyed him, but an engineer who understood code the way poets understood meter and rhyme. It's exceptional work, he admitted. Over the following days, they developed a rhythm. Ethan arrived early, before the building filled with people who treated assistants like furniture. He refined translation algorithms while Lily colored in her corner or played educational games on the iPad Alexandra had quietly purchased just for her. And Alexandra, powerful, untouchable Alexandra Sterling, would sit on the floor during breaks and build Lego castles with a 7-year-old, laughing in sign language about dragons and princesses and all the things children believe before the world teaches them otherwise. Ethan tried not to notice how Alexandra's entire face changed when she wasn't performing the role of CEO. Tried not to notice the loneliness that clung to her like expensive perfume, or the hunger in her eyes when she watched him with Lily, the hunger for a life she'd never permitted herself to want. Then Nathan Harris walked into the lab without knocking. He was 42 years old and wore cruelty like a custom-tailored suit. Chief Operating Officer. The man who had ignored Maya's 14 safety warnings. The man who had orchestrated the cover-up. The man who had killed Ethan's wife and walked away clean. So you're the widow, Nathan said, voice dripping contempt. Cross, wasn't it? The one who couldn't accept that accidents happen? Ethan stood slowly, fists clenching. I prefer man whose wife you murdered. Nathan's smile was sharp as broken glass. Careful, slander's expensive, though I suppose you learned that during your failed lawsuit. Alexandra positioned herself between them, every line of her body screaming tension. Nathan, Mr. Cross is my hire. The board approved. The board doesn't know he's here to sabotage us, Nathan interrupted smoothly. But I do my research, Alexandra. I know exactly who this man is and why he's really here. His attention shifted to Lily, who had stopped coloring to watch the adults with the worried expression of children who'd learned that raised voices meant danger. Nathan's voice dropped to something soft and poisonous. Sweet kid. Deaf, right? Raising her alone must be challenging. You have to be so careful with children these days. Accidents happen, especially to little girls. The threat was crystal clear. Ethan lunged forward, but Alexandra and security were already pulling him back. Nathan laughed, straightened his diamond cufflinks, and strolled out as casually as if he'd been discussing the weather. I'm taking my daughter home. Ethan's voice shook with barely controlled rage. Right now. Ethan, please, Alexandra started, but he was already gathering Lily's things with trembling hands. Like you protected Maya? The words came out like weapons. No thanks. The door slammed behind them. Alexandra stood alone in the lab, surrounded by millions of dollars of equipment that suddenly felt completely meaningless. She walked to the private bathroom and locked the door with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. She didn't remove her hearing aids this time. Instead, she turned on the faucet to mask the sound and let herself break, truly break, for the first time in 5 years. That night, while Lily slept, Ethan did something he knew he shouldn't. He remembered something Maya had told him years ago, a backdoor she'd built into Nexus's safety reporting system, a way to access files even if her account was deleted. She called it her insurance policy. He thought she was being paranoid, Now he understood she'd been preparing for exactly this. The back door still worked. He navigated through folders marked litigation archive and safety compliance historical, following digital breadcrumbs until he found what made his blood run cold. 14 reports filed by Maya Cross. Every single one flagged urgent, safety critical. Every single one warning about autonomous brake failures in wet conditions. Every single one ignored. Email chains between Maya and Nathan Harris told the story. Maya, brake failure rate in rain is 23%. We need immediate recall. Nathan, recall cost $400. Projected lawsuit settlements $50. The math is simple, Ms. Cross. Maya, you're choosing money over human lives. Nathan, I'm protecting 3,000 jobs. You're protecting your moral superiority. Maya, I'm going to the FDA tomorrow. Nathan, that would be unfortunate for everyone involved. Reconsider. Buried in a hidden folder marked Test Footage Confidential, Ethan found a video that stopped his heart completely. His wife, alive. Behind the wheel of a Nexus autonomous vehicle on a rain-slick test track. Brake Test 7. Maya's calm professional voice filled his headphones. Speed 65 miles per hour. Initiating emergency stop sequence. She pressed the brake pedal. Nothing happened. Calm shattered into panic. Override failing. Nathan, kill the engine now. Nathan Harris's voice came through off camera, detached and clinical. Let it run. We need complete data. I'm going to crash. Stop the car. The vehicle slammed into a concrete barrier at full speed. The airbag deployed with explosive force. The video cut to black. When it resumed, Nathan was speaking to someone off camera, his voice devoid of emotion. Delete this footage immediately. Mark the incident as equipment malfunction due to user error. No one sees this recording. Ethan watched the video 3 times, his hands shaking so badly he could barely control the mouse. Then he noticed the file metadata. Uploaded by M. Cross personal backup. Maya had known. She'd saved the evidence. She'd prepared for the possibility that they would silence her. 2 days after uploading this video, she'd been killed by the very technology she'd tried to make safe. Ethan grabbed his phone. It was 6 in the morning, but he didn't care. Alexandra answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting. Ethan, I found proof. His voice was raw from silent tears. Nathan killed Maya, and I need your help. 30 minutes later, he sat in Alexandra Sterling's penthouse showing her everything. The emails, the reports, the video of Maya's test crash. The evidence of a cover-up that reached the highest levels of the company. Alexandra watched Maya's crash 3 times, her hand pressed against her mouth, tears streaming freely down her face. I didn't know, she whispered. I swear I didn't know it was this bad. Your father was CEO then, Ethan said. It wasn't quite an accusation, but close. After my mother died in the chemical explosion that took my hearing, he became obsessed with the company's reputation. He said weakness was death in business. Alexandra's hands shook as she signed and spoke simultaneously. He told me an engineer named Maya had been handled by Nathan. I didn't ask questions because I was a coward who valued her career more than truth. The confession hung between them, heavy with shame and regret. Why did you really hire me? Ethan asked. Alexandra met his eyes, and in that moment she wasn't a CEO worth billions. She was just a woman who'd spent her adult life building walls so high, she'd forgotten what it felt like to be human. Because when Lily looked at me like I was just another person, not a CEO, not a disability, just someone who deserved kindness, I remembered what I'd lost, and I was ashamed that I'd forgotten. Their hands touched on the table between them. This time, neither pulled away. We go public, Ethan said. Show everyone what Nathan did. He'll bury us in legal motions before we upload a single file, Alexandra said. Then we do it where he can't stop us, in front of 500 shareholders at next week's annual meeting. Alexandra's eyes widened. The board is voting to remove me tomorrow. Nathan orchestrated it. Then you need leverage, Ethan said. Before Alexandra could respond, her phone rang. Video call from Jessica Morse, her CFO and closest friend for 10 years. Alex, I just heard Nathan's planning something terrible. Jessica's voice cut off as someone walked past in the background. Ethan leaned forward, eyes sharp. Alex, look at the reflection in her screen. On Jessica's computer monitor, visible in the window's reflection, was an email draft addressed to Nathan Harris. Subject line: Board votes secured, she's done. The betrayal hit Alexandra like physical violence. "Jess," she said quietly, "you're helping him?" Jessica's face drained of color. "Alex, I can explain." 10 years. I trusted you with everything." Jessica's expression hardened with jealousy, finally unleashed. "You became CEO at 32, Alex. I'm 32 and still answering to you. I earned the right to—" Alexandra ended the call. She sat absolutely still for a long moment. Then she started to cry, not the controlled tears of someone trained to grieve privately, but raw, broken sobs of someone whose last armor had just shattered. Ethan moved beside her on the couch. After hesitating only a heartbeat, he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. Alexandra leaned into this man she barely knew and allowed herself to be vulnerable for the first time in a decade. Lily appeared in the doorway, wearing borrowed pajamas 3 sizes too large, sleepy-eyed and concerned. She saw her father holding the crying woman and smiled with the wisdom of children who understand love before they understand words. "You look like a family," she signed. The emergency board meeting unfolded exactly as Nathan had orchestrated. 9 board members sat around polished mahogany while Nathan presented his manufactured case against Alexandra Sterling. Fabricated evidence of misconduct, photoshopped images suggesting inappropriate relationships, financial reports showing profits down 8% due to Alexandra's misguided ethics initiatives. Robert Sterling, Alexandra's own father, stood and delivered the killing blow in a voice that carried the weight of empire. "I built this company over 40 years. I will not watch my daughter destroy it for sentimentality." The vote was 7-2. Alexandra Sterling was removed as CEO effective immediately. She left carrying a small box of personal belongings, framed photos, a coffee mug Lily had decorated, the hearing aids she'd stopped wearing because she was exhausted from pretending. Ethan met her in the parking garage beneath the tower. "I have nothing now," Alexandra said, her voice eerily calm. "No position, no father, no friend." "You have me," Ethan said firmly. "You have Lily, and you have the truth. That's not nothing." "Why are you still here?" Real confusion colored her question. "You could walk away right now. Take whatever settlement money remains and never look back. Because Maya would want me to finish what she started. And because—" He paused, then gently wiped a tear from her cheek. "Because I don't want you to fight this alone." In the parking garage's fluorescent lighting, surrounded by luxury cars belonging to people who just betrayed her, Alexandra Sterling learned what it felt like when someone chose to stand beside you, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. That night, as they prepared for the shareholders' meeting, Ethan's phone rang. Unknown number. The voice was digitally distorted, mechanical and menacing. "Mr. Cross, if you proceed with your plan, we will file for emergency custody review citing child endangerment. Your daughter will be removed from your care. Think carefully about your next move." The line went dead. Ethan looked at Alexandra, and she saw fear in his eyes. Not for himself, but for Lily. "They're threatening to take my daughter." Alexandra's expression shifted from grief to something harder and fiercer than he'd ever seen. "Then we don't just expose Nathan. We dismantle the entire system that protects men like him." The next afternoon, a FedEx package arrived at Ethan's apartment. No return address. Inside, a shoebox with a note in unfamiliar handwriting. "Maya gave this to me 3 years ago. Said if anything happened to her, I should wait until someone started asking the right questions. I think that time is now." A friend who believed her. Inside the shoebox was a pink USB drive labeled, "For Ethan, if I don't come home." Ethan's hands trembled as he plugged it into his laptop. Maya's face appeared on screen, alive and luminous and 14 weeks pregnant, with a baby he'd never known existed. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, and Ethan's carefully constructed composure shattered. "If you're watching this, I'm gone," which means Nathan Harris did something terrible. She explained everything methodically, like the engineer she'd been, the ignored safety reports, the explicit threats, the backup files she'd uploaded to a secure cloud, test footage, 2022 securemail.com, password Lily042015. Then the video shifted to hidden camera footage from her purse, a confrontation in Nathan's corner office. "You're brilliant, Maya." Nathan's voice was almost kind. "But you fundamentally misunderstand how business works." "I understand you're going to kill someone," Maya said steadily. "If you go to the FDA, I'll ensure you never work in technology again. Your husband either. Then I'll go to the press." Nathan leaned forward and his voice dropped to something poisonous. "Your daughter is deaf. Special needs children are expensive. Medical bills, education, therapy. Do you really want to be unemployed and facing a defamation lawsuit simultaneously? You're threatening my child? I'm protecting 3,000 families. You're protecting your ego. The math isn't complicated." The hidden footage ended with Maya's voice speaking directly to the camera she'd secretly placed. "Ethan, if I die, make them pay. Not with revenge, with truth. And tell Lily that her mama loved her more than anything in this world, even more than being right." Ethan watched the video twice more, memorizing every word. Then he called Alexandra. "I have everything we need," he said. "Tomorrow we end this." The annual shareholders meeting of Nexus Technologies filled the Seattle Convention Center. 500 investors, 50 financial reporters, live stream connections to over 100,000 viewers worldwide. Nathan Harris took the stage in a Navy suit that cost more than most people earned monthly, radiating the confidence of a man who believed he'd already won. Fiscal year 2024 delivered revenue of $2.3 billion, representing 18% growth, he began smoothly. "Under my leadership," the lights died. The massive screens behind him flickered. Error. System override. Uploading. In the control room, Ethan had accessed the presentation system using Maya's old credentials. The backdoor she'd built, the insurance policy Nathan had never bothered to close because he'd never imagined anyone would dare use it. The first video played, 40 seconds of Maya's test crash. The sound of her screaming as brakes failed. The sickening impact. Nathan's voice ordering evidence deletion. 500 people watched in absolute silence. The second video, Maya's confrontation with Nathan, his threats against her family playing for everyone to hear. The third, Maya's final message, a dead woman speaking truth to power from beyond the grave. The crowd erupted. Phones materialized, recording everything. Reporters shouted questions that created cascading chaos. Investors rose in outrage. Nathan screamed for security to cut power, but it was already too late. The live stream had gone viral. Millions were watching truth demolish lies in real time across every social media platform. Then Alexandra Sterling walked onto the stage. She wore no hearing aids. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders. She looked simultaneously vulnerable and absolutely fearless. A woman with nothing left to lose, and therefore everything to fight for. Behind her, the massive screen activated the AI translation system she and Ethan had built together. The system that could transform sign language into spoken words. Alexandra began to sign, and the AI voice filled the auditorium with perfect clarity. "My name is Alexandra Sterling. I was your CEO. I am deaf, and I was silent when I should have screamed." She told them everything. Maya's 14 safety reports, each one flagged critical. Nathan's systematic dismissals, the cover-up that had cost a brilliant engineer her life and her unborn child. "But a man named Ethan Cross taught me something these past weeks. Silence isn't strength. Silence is complicity. And I was complicit." She looked into the audience, found Ethan standing in the back with Lily in his arms, and signed directly to him with the AI translating every gesture. "Mr. Cross, please join me." Ethan hesitated. Lily pushed him forward with small hands that somehow carried the strength of both her parents. "Go, Daddy. Mama would want you to." He walked to the stage, took the microphone Alexandra offered, and spoke publicly for the first time about the wife he'd lost and the truth he'd spent 3 years trying to find. "Your company offered me $25,000 to stay quiet about my wife's death. I almost took it because I was drowning in bills and grief, and the kind of desperation that forces people to compromise everything they believe in." He displayed Maya's wedding photo on the screen, her smile, her brilliance, her courage frozen in pixels. "But this woman, Alexandra Sterling, gave me something Nathan Harris never could. Not money, not power. She gave me a chance to tell the truth, and she stood beside me when doing so cost her everything. That's when FBI agents stepped forward from positions they'd held throughout the presentation. They'd been waiting because Alexandra had contacted them 72 hours earlier and provided every piece of evidence Ethan had discovered. Nathan Harris, Robert Sterling, you're under arrest for corporate manslaughter, obstruction of justice, and criminal conspiracy. Nathan bolted for the side exit. Security tackled him to the marble floor in front of 500 witnesses and countless cameras broadcasting live to the world. Robert Sterling stood with the defeated dignity of a man watching his empire collapse in real time. He looked at his daughter standing on that stage, and for just a moment, something human flickered in his eyes. Regret, perhaps, or recognition of what he'd sacrificed for success. You've destroyed everything I built. Alexandra. Alexandra removed her hearing aids, she'd worn them just for this moment, and placed them on the podium like a crown she no longer wanted. Then she signed, letting the AI translate her final words to her father. No, father. You destroyed it when you chose money over morality, reputation over truth, power over people. I'm just making sure everyone knows what you really built. An empire founded on lies and maintained through silence. The handcuffs clicked shut on both men. The auditorium erupted into chaos. Questions shouted, cameras flashing, investors demanding emergency votes. But Alexandra and Ethan simply walked off the stage together, Lily between them holding both their hands. 6 months later, the trials dominated headlines across America. Nathan Harris received 18 years in federal prison. Robert Sterling took a plea agreement for 12 years. Dozens of executives resigned or were terminated. The civil lawsuits totaled over $340 million paid to victims' families. Alexandra was reinstated as CEO by an 87% shareholder vote, the largest margin in the company's history. Her first official act was establishing the Maya Cross Foundation, $50 million dedicated to whistleblower protection, STEM scholarships for deaf students, and technology safety advocacy. Ethan became the foundation's technical director at a salary of $180,000. Lily's education was fully funded through graduate school if she wanted it. Jessica Morse had been demoted to senior analyst, but she didn't quit. For 6 months, she arrived early and stayed late, rebuilding the financial transparency system she'd once helped corrupt. At a company-wide meeting, she stood before 300 employees and apologized publicly, not with excuses, but with detailed accountability. I let jealousy poison my judgment and ambition destroy the most important friendship of my life, she said, voice shaking with genuine remorse. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to be someone who tells the truth from now on. Alexandra watched from the front row. After the meeting, she approached Jessica with measured words. You get 1 second chance. Prove you understand why the first one mattered. Jessica nodded, tears streaming down her face, and went back to work, earning redemption one transparent decision at a time. But the moment that mattered most to Ethan happened in a hospital room at Seattle Children's Hospital. Lily was 8 years old now, about to receive her cochlear implant. The $78,000 procedure was fully funded by the Maya Cross Foundation, the first of hundreds of children who would receive the same gift. Ethan held his daughter's hand as the audiologist activated the device for the first time. Lily's eyes went wide with wonder. She could hear the monitor beeping, the rustle of starched sheets, her father's breathing creating rhythm beside her. Daddy, she said aloud, her voice small and uncertain from disuse. Say something. Ethan's throat tightened with emotion so powerful it felt physical. I love you, butterfly. Lily gasped, and tears rolled down her cheeks. You sound like sunlight feels when it's warm on your face. She turned to Alexandra, who stood in the doorway watching with her own tears falling freely and unashamed. What about you, Mama Alex? Alexandra froze, the title catching her completely off guard. Lily, I'm not. You're here. You love Daddy. You love me. That's what mamas do. Alexandra crossed the room and knelt, pulling the little girl into her arms. She signed and cried and finally allowed herself to feel everything she'd spent a decade trying to bury beneath ambition and fear. I love you too, sweet girl, so very much. Ethan placed his hand over theirs, and for the first time since Maya's death, he felt something that might actually be peace rather than just the absence of war. 1 year after the arrests, on a Sunday morning with sunlight streaming through windows, Skyline Cafe reopened under new ownership and a new name. Ethan had purchased it with part of his settlement, transforming it completely. He'd renamed it Maya's Place. The menu was now offered in print, ASL, and Braille. Every staff member had completed sign language certification. From 7 to 9 each morning, they held silent hours. No music, no loud sounds, just space where people with sensory sensitivities could exist without apology. The first person he'd hired was Tyler, the barista who'd once mocked a deaf woman for daring to order coffee. Ethan gave him a second chance he hadn't deserved, but desperately needed, and Tyler had grasped it with both hands. Now he wore an ASL certification pin on his apron and taught free signing classes on weekends. Alexandra walked in wearing jeans and a soft sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, no hearing aids in sight. She didn't need them here. This was a place built on understanding rather than accommodation. Ethan smiled from behind the counter. "The usual?" his hands asked. She smiled back, the genuine kind that reached her eyes. "Always." He was preparing her oat milk latte when Lily bounded out from the back room, 9 years old now, thriving in mainstream school with her cochlear implant while remaining fluent in the language of her heart. She threw her arms around Alexandra in a hug that lifted the woman's feet completely off the ground. That's when Ethan handed Alexandra her coffee. The cup sleeve had writing on it in his careful handwriting. "Will you listen with your heart forever?" Alexandra looked up to find Ethan on one knee, a simple silver ring in his palm, a band that matched the bracelet he still wore every day. Lily signed frantically beside him, barely containing her excitement. "Please say yes. I already call you Mama." Alexandra laughed and cried simultaneously, signing her answer before speaking it aloud. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." They kissed while the entire cafe erupted in applause. Even Tyler stood in the corner wiping his eyes, forever changed by witnessing the kind of grace that transforms people. 2 years after that morning, Maya's Place had become a gathering point for Seattle's deaf and hard-of-hearing community. The walls displayed photos of families, couples, children learning to sign, adults discovering that different didn't mean diminished. On the wall of honor hung Maya Cross's photograph with a brass plaque reading, "She spoke truth when silence was easier, 1988-2022. Her voice still changes the world." Below it, a chalkboard announced the daily special, "Listen with your heart latte, free for anyone learning ASL." On this particular Sunday, Alexandra Sterling Cross sat by the window, 6 months pregnant. Her hand rested on her growing belly where a baby girl kicked and turned, already loved beyond measure, by three people who understood that family was built through choice as much as biology. Ethan brought her decaf latte and sat beside her, signing as he spoke, "For you and baby Maya." Alexandra's eyes widened with emotion. "We're really naming her Maya? She started all of this. It seems right." Ethan's hand covered hers on her belly. Lily appeared with homework, now moving effortlessly between sign language and speech, between two worlds she'd learned to bridge rather than choose between. "Can I teach baby Maya to sign?" she asked her father. "You'll be the most amazing big sister in the world," Ethan said aloud, then signed the same words so both the women he loved could receive them. Through the window, Seattle moved at its usual frantic pace. Cars honked. People rushed past with phones and problems and carefully constructed lives that looked nothing like happiness. But inside Maya's Place, there existed something different, something that felt like sanctuary. An elderly deaf man shuffled through the door, hesitant and expecting the usual dismissal that came with being different in a world designed for sameness. Lily bounded up to him with the joy of someone who'd never learned that kindness was optional. "Welcome to Maya's Place. What would you like?" The man's eyes filled with tears. "No one has ever signed to me in a coffee shop. Not once in 70 years. Ethan joined them, signing with the fluency that came from love rather than study. "Here, everyone has a voice, even in silence, especially in silence." Outside, the rain that had been threatening all morning finally broke through the clouds, but with it came light. shafts of gold breaking through gray to illuminate the world in ways that made everything look new. Inside, Alexandra placed Ethan's hand over her belly so he could feel their daughter moving. Lily wrapped her arms around both of them, signing with one hand while holding tight to the family she'd helped create. On the wall, Maya's photograph watched over them, a woman who had spoken truth and paid the ultimate price, but whose legacy had transformed silence into the most powerful force in the world. The force of love that refuses to stay quiet. The force of justice that demands to be heard. The force of people who understand that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply listening with your whole heart. In that small cafe in downtown Seattle, with coffee brewing and laughter rising and hands moving in the ancient language of connection, three people who had been broken discovered themselves whole. Not because the pain had disappeared, but because they had learned that some endings are simply beginnings wearing different clothes, and that the most powerful voice in the world isn't the loudest one. It's the one that refuses to be silenced. Inspired by over 240 documented corporate whistleblower cases in the United States between 2015 and 2024, the Maya Cross Foundation has funded 1,947 students and counting as of 2025. According to the National Deaf Center, 92% of deaf Americans report experiencing workplace discrimination. This story is dedicated to every person who spoke truth when silence would have been easier. Learn American Sign Language, mayacrossfoundation.org. Learn.